Turning out, this is Good Jobs' first day at IRE 2020, and we're speaking on a great panel today about Amazon and e-commerce. Starting us off today will be Laura Mahoney from Bloomberg Tax, based in Sacramento, who's done some SACO reporting on incentive deals for e-commerce warehouses there. Next will be Spencer Soper, who's been covering Amazon workers for a long time and most recently working conditions under both COVID and the increasing casualization, I guess, of Amazon work. It's the best way to put it. And James Jacoby will finish. He's the producer of the recent Frontline segment on the rise of Amazon. And with that, take it over, Laura.
Yeah, I just might have to have someone else go first. I am having a hard time getting my screen to share.
Do we need to give her permission? Is there a...
I think it's some kind of setting on mine. I am not...
Multiple participants can share simultaneously. Let me see if that helps you.
All right, let's see. Sorry, it's like my first up, and I'm getting my first technical difficulty. Let's see. I'll not be able to record. Okay.
Should we have Spencer go first while you try?
Yeah, why don't you have Spencer go first, and I'll try to work this out. Give me a sec. Sorry.
Okay. No
I might have to switch to my other computer.
That's fine. Spencer, take it away.
Okay. I'm not sure what everybody wants to know, but I guess like a company like Amazon, it's been very well covered, right? So the question is always what's new, and so the new phenomenon now, and it's even this isn't that new, is, you know, obviously they're hiring very aggressively in an otherwise down economic cycle, so they stand out for that reason. And so we have, when you're covering Amazon, you really have to consider the background economic conditions in which they operate, because they will fluctuate. There's not some standard operating procedure for Amazon continuously. There will be some, but it will tweak in response to the market conditions. And so I think that what we're seeing now is going to be likely be an abrupt change from when the job market was tightening and they made a big deal about offering people $15, and they definitely put a lot of public relations energy into differentiating Amazon from other kind of, maybe like entry-level job opportunities like a fast food place or a part-time retail job and that sort of thing. And in fairness to Amazon, they are better than those. If you interview people who work at Amazon making $15 an hour, and the alternative was cobbling together part-time hours at a convenience store and a supermarket, they're quite happy to be where they are. And so, but what we're entering now is going to be a more Amazon's leverage is going to significantly increase, whereas before it was a tight labor market and job hunters could be finicky about the jobs they were seeking. We're entering a more employer, the few employers that are hiring are going to have more cards. And so that's where we just have to watch and see how Amazon plays that leverage. And we likely will, but it's going to be in subtle ways. So that's where, that's where I would focus a lot of reporting energy now. There's that, and I know Good Jobs First tracks is a very good resource for you in tracking economic deals and incentives deals and that sort of thing. But the counter to watch there is Amazon expands, particularly in the suburbs, and speed is a priority for Amazon. You may see less Amazon going out hat in hand to expand the way it did. I think it most famously did with its second headquarters search.
Spencer, I just want to say, Laura, you're successfully sharing now. Can you unshare so Spencer can still get his...
Sorry.
Thanks. That's okay. It works.
Excellent.
Yeah, so I think that you have to also consider speed. And so when Amazon has time to do a project, you know, it will look for those subsidies if they're available. But particularly now with their suburban expansion, and especially with them being uh, uh, with the spike in demand around COVID-19, they simply don't have the time to be foraging for deals. They just need space and capacity, and so that's another thing to consider. So I'm just trying to think of the different, you know, how the background, like Amazon's generally the same story. It's this big company. It sells more and more stuff online. It gets it to you more and more quickly, and it's you know, getting more and more market share. You know, that's the constant theme. And then we have to look at the background economic conditions in which it operates, and that's where we're going to see things shift a little bit. And that's where I think that a lot of the things that Good Jobs First has been measuring, especially with the suburban expansion, we might not see this prominently. You know, they're not necessarily coming, but and I think, again, I think that is because speed is such a is such a factor. They don't really they don't want to go through public hearings. They don't want to wait for bureaucratic approvals. They're looking for warehouses that are plug and play. We can move in and get it up and running, and the fewer pencil pushers that need to get involved in this, the better, because that's their priority right now.
Spencer, that's really good. A quick question. Have you covered, or who do you like covering the issue of the last mile subcontractors, right? Who are not Amazon employees, and maybe even their bosses aren't Amazon employees?
Well, a lot of people have done stories on that. We've covered that. So to peel that apart, you have to look at they have Amazon Delivery Service Partners, and it's not legally a franchise, but that's the best way to think of it. That's where Amazon, I can't remember if it was a couple of years ago, you know, Jeff Bezos put out this call to arms to aspiring entrepreneurs saying, hey, if you want to start your own business, you know, for as little as $10,000, we'll have you up and running. And so that's where Amazon really appealed to, you know, aspiring small business owners, because when you think about it, they were really beholden to a lot of large carriers. And Amazon doesn't like that. Amazon likes to be the big guy negotiating with a lot of little guys, not the other way around. And so what the delivery service partners accomplish for Amazon is now you have basically like McDonald's franchises opening all over, Subway franchising opening all over, but instead it's a small delivery franchise. And so this delivery franchise, you know, might employ 50 people. Amazon, it's very easy to get up and running. Amazon negotiates, you know, vehicle insurance, vehicle leases, classified advertising. So again, it can appeal to someone who's thought about starting a small business but doesn't know where to go and doesn't have a lot of capital to start. And, you know, Amazon will help them get up and running with a small delivery franchise. And then what Amazon accomplishes with that, one is it just kind of offloads all of the risks of being an employer and the costs of being an employer. And when Amazon initiated this, a big cost of being an employer was simply hiring, because the job market was so hot. You know, you would have people come in, take one of these jobs, and maybe quit a couple weeks later, you know, after, and it can cost thousands of dollars to onboard someone when you consider the cost of advertising and training. So Amazon was kind of able to push those costs off, and then also have a lot of small companies competing for its business. So that puts Amazon in a very powerful position, negotiating position, because it can just say, this is what we want. And then survival of the fittest kind of kicks in, and whichever operators are willing to meet that mandate will rise above the others, and the others will drop off. So that's one layer of the delivery service partners that's still out there, especially with the suburban expansion. That's generally how they operate. It would be a delivery station that is feeding these kind of smaller carriers that are basically created to be exclusive delivery partners of Amazon, but they Greg makes a good point that they are not technically employed by Amazon. There's this kind of fisherization of who the actual employer is. And that also has ramifications in union organizing. You know, if any of these, you know, if suddenly, so now say Amazon has tens of thousands of drivers out there, it would be very difficult for those drivers to collectively organize because they are broken apart into these small units. And even if one small unit in Denver, hypothetically, no news, I'm not divulging any news, starts talking about forming a union, Amazon can very easily shift volume to someone else and just let that operator wither and die. So there's a lot of strategic advantages by the way Amazon has done this. And then the only other thing is, in addition to that, in addition to these van drivers that are full-time and, so basically spend 10 hours a day delivering for Amazon, Amazon also has, is tapping into this gig economy with flex drivers. And so this would be similar to an Uber driver, giving you a ride in their own Toyota Prius. Amazon has people who they download an app, and then they can make deliveries for Amazon kind of on a very flexible basis. And so these are not technically employees of anyone. They're independent contractors using their own car, their own gas. And this actually, for people in the gig economy, they actually like it. The pay is pretty decent compared to like an Uber or a DoorDash. So it's actually quite competitive. And there's been a big surge in the number of people looking for that kind of work because both you had the pandemic hit, so more people looking, but then because of the pandemic, there's fewer people using things like Uber and Lyft. So even within the subset of people already in this economy, they're foraging for work. And so that's another thing where we have to watch that Amazon is going to have tremendous leverage over these gig workers, eager to make deliveries. So again, Amazon will just be able to be in a very powerful negotiating position. The downside of that is Amazon has a lot less control, and you'll always see like these videos pop up of someone like punting a package onto somebody's roof or something, or I think there was one where someone famously like took a dump in someone's driveway, and the guy like called Amazon and was like, I didn't order this, or whatever, but like that kind of thing. So they're constantly grappling with trying to optimize, how can we get this stuff delivered for as little as possible with the best quality experience as possible. That would be the kind of the tightrope they're walking.
Super good wrap up, Spencer. Laura's ready now. I'm sorry.
If I was going to ask a question.
No, we're going to do Q&As after each speaker, after the three speakers finish.
Yeah.
All right, thanks. Go ahead, Laura.
Great. Well, now that my screen sharing is working, I'm going to not talk about Amazon so much today, but I am talking about a series of stories that I did in 2009 and into this year, focusing on a quirk in the state sales tax law in California. Texas has a similar quirk, and there's some drama there. I'm happy to talk about that as well, but today mostly I'm talking about California. It's a quirk that dates back to the 1950s. And I also like to call this, in addition to talking about how cities lure e-commerce giants with sales tax subsidies, how I found out that when I bought a $100 microwave from BestBuy.com, the city of Dinuba and Best Buy each got 50 cents of my sales tax payment on that purchase. The fun things you find out while you're reporting a story. So a bill that was introduced in 2019 got me inspired to do.
Laura, your panels aren't moving along. I don't know if you're trying to move them, but we're not seeing them move with.
Oh, they're not? That's weird because they're moving on my end. Okay.
And you can also make your slides full frame if you want. There you go. Great.
Is that working? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. So this bill was introduced in early 2019 to ban these sales tax sharing deals that cities are increasingly engaging in. And what are they? So the state sales tax law has a 1 percentage point increment that goes back to the municipality of based on where the transaction occurred, not where the customer lives. So you can see how with e-commerce growth, all of those doorsteps in suburbia getting their packages, this sales tax increment is not going to those places. It's going to the place where the warehouse. And so the deals work so that the company agrees to locate a warehouse or a sales office within the city, a specific city, and designates that location as the location for all online sales in California. So no matter where you are in California, you buy something online, the city where the warehouse is gets this increment of sales tax. The money goes to the city, and then the city typically gives about half of it back to the company itself. So it's like a big circle. About 10% of California's 482 cities are negotiating deals like this. And so that makes a lot of tension between neighbors, where one city may be really aggressive about it and its neighbors are watching all of the sales tax revenue go there. So when I started reporting on the story, my first call was to the chief of staff for the state senator who was carrying this bill. And he's a former reporter. I've known him for a long time. He had plenty of interesting things to say. And one of the things is he gave me the name of this lawyer who he said he had heard was negotiating these deals. And a simple Google search of this guy's name turned up this 2015 advice letter from the state ethics watchdog agency telling him that what he was doing was illegal. And I couldn't find any other news coverage of this at all. And this sent me on quite a wild ride, because this guy got advice in 2015 that what he's doing is illegal, but he's continuing to advise cities and brokering these deals. And in the deal, he negotiates a cut for himself, like 20%. So he's set to get millions of dollars over decades, because a lot of these agreements last 10, 20, 30, even 40 years. So that was a lot of fun. I talked to Greg a lot. Greg, you were great at giving me the perspective on why these deals were both kind of usual and unusual. And you had lots of other ideas of who to talk to. I talked to a lot of people I talked to the California League of Cities. A lot of the city officials were either very eager or not eager to talk to me, depending on which side of this they fall on. So at first my editor wanted 1,000 words, no more than 1,000 words. And that was it, and one story. And then we decided to go bigger. So I've done more than 20 stories over the past year, showing for the first time anywhere that these cities are giving back tens of millions of dollars each year in sales tax revenue that consumers are paying back to these companies, and they involve household names like Apple, Best Buy, Home Depot, QVC. I did a story just last week about Nike cutting a deal with the city of Ontario. It's going to give them $17 million over the next 11 years. The governor signed a bill about a year ago. The law took effect in January, requiring a lot more disclosure about these deals, but he did veto the bill banning them outright. So the bill that inspired me got vetoed. My stories also prompted the ethics watchdog to investigate this lawyer because he's brokering both sides of the deal and then writing in a percentage for himself. And I'm waiting on the outcome of that investigation. I want to talk for a minute about Apple, which was kind of like the granddaddy of all these deals. So I wanted to find out, how much have all these cities paid to these companies, and Apple was the oldest, and I was pretty sure it was the biggest. And so Cupertino, the hometown of Apple, and a lot of the other cities where these deals exist, said that they would not give me the payment data because it was confidential taxpayer information protected under state law. Apple was really nervous about this information coming out because if you knew how much sales tax was allocated to Cupertino, you could do some math and back out, what their sales were in California every year. But I was arguing that these are payments under a contract that the city had. They're a vendor like anyone else. And so in our first story that we ran in April of 2019, we said that we didn't have payment data, but we were trying to get it through Public Records Act requests. And then after my second story came out, Cupertino decided to tell me, oh yeah, it turns out that we do believe that this is public information. And the reason is that city councils approve check registers every month. So any check that a city pays out to anybody is in this register, and the city council approves it, and it's on their agenda, and it's all public. And so they said, this is public information. And And here are 6,000 pages of check registers going back to 1997. Have fun. You can dig through them and find out where all these payments came from. So you can see this highlighted entry is the Apple sales tax remittance for April to June of the year 2000. And this is a sample of one of the many, many pages we went through. We used OCR and we used the R programming language to scrub it or to harvest the data off of it, but then we used our own eyeballs to verify everything. And it was a pretty grueling exercise. But we were able to show that over the 20 years of this agreement existing, Cupertino has paid almost $70 million to Apple, which is kind of a drop in the bucket for Apple, but it is a chunk of change for the city of Cupertino, which is not a super large city. Cupertino, and the split between Cupertino and Apple was 50-50 until about 2013. And then Apple reduced their percentage down to 35% of the sales tax revenue when they were in the middle of negotiating building their giant circular office building campus. So even though so you can see that dip happened when they cut it down to 35%, but then the total payments have gone back up to where they were before. So these Apple or Cupertino turning this data over really helped open it up to get the data from other cities. We had a request into Dinuba, which is a small, poor city in the Central Valley that has a deal with Best Buy. We had a request into Ontario, a city in the Inland Empire that is really gung-ho about these deals and has more than 10 of them. And we had a request into Corona, which is a neighbor of Ontario that had a deal with LuLaRoe, which is a multi-level marketing women's athleisure retailer. And that deal has since gone bust. But so Dinuba ended up really turning over everything. They gave us all the copies of the checks. They gave us emails. They gave us, they even included the information that other cities said was confidential, the quarterly sales amounts that for Best Buy in California, and on which all of the other tax calculations were based. So it was like, they gave us the math. They showed us this whole calculation. And all the other cities had said that this was protected. Corona gave us a bunch of information too, and then they have this feature on their website called Open Checkbook, which you can search any vendor on their website and it will show you all the payments that have gone to that person over time or that vendor over time. I don't know why all cities don't have this. It was amazing. And it was fantastic. But Ontario was the city that just really lawyered up and refused to give us anything. And we had to go back and forth for months. The lawyer for the city said, off the record, those other cities are fucking crazy for giving you that information. It was a lot of fun. But eventually they decided that they couldn't hold out and they gave us 11,000 pages of documents, and these grainy PDFs of check registers going back 5 years. And we had to go through the whole drill again to create our own database. And we were able to show that they've paid out $28 million over the past 5 years to a handful of companies. I'm continuing to follow this. There's a couple of laws that require more disclosures about these going forward. And I should be having more stories out coming soon. So stay tuned, but I wanted to leave you with a picture of my microwave that I bought in 2017 at bestbuy.com. I picked it up at the Best Buy a couple miles from my house. And I found out as I was researching this story that since it was about $100, I think Dinuba, which is 200 miles or so from me, got a buck. And I think Best Buy probably got about half of that back to themselves. So that's me. I probably ran over time, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks. After James finishes, we'll take questions for anybody. James, the floor is yours.
Right. Thanks so much. So the work we did on Amazon is quite different than what you guys have been doing in the trenches. In some ways, what Spencer said about like what's new about Amazon, our task was to kind of figure out how to tell the story of a 25-year kind of trajectory of the company, and to go back. It started basically, you know, when our editors asked us, it was right after the second headquarters thing. And I was reading a lot of what Greg was writing and things like that. And they said, all right, clearly the character of this company has come to the fore in some ways in this HQ2 scenario. Why don't you try to go back and tell us the history of the rise of this company? And you know, I have to say that in an interview that we did with Spencer, Spencer really helped frame and used the word again a few times today of leverage, of how this company exercises its leverage. It's a word, Greg, you've used a lot in terms of how it leverages its power and how it's so opportunistic, and that it helped us frame, at least in a story of tremendous scope, which isn't just e-commerce, it's cloud computing and entertainment and all sorts of other businesses that they've gotten into. How do we kind of frame this whole thing, which seems like this kind of multi-armed beast, which doesn't really necessarily all add up to something that's coherent. But one of the things, and Greg, I know you were interested in this, is to kind of go back and try to find early executives who could bring us into the thinking early on as to how Bezos envisioned this company, what the so-called Amazon way of thinking was, and to pose to them questions about their increasing leverage over the years, whether it be with the book publishers early on and the leverage that they knew that they had there, their leverage, as Spencer had written exposés on when it came to their expansion and their tax advantages, Greg, as you talked about in the film, but really to kind of take a lot of the work that you guys have done over the years and bounce that off of people that were inside the company during those years. It was exceedingly difficult to get anyone on camera that had worked in any position of power at Amazon, even lower down positions. And what we ended up with is probably about 8 former kind of manager level people in the film. And the appeal to the dozens and dozens that we reached out to was just simply that we wanted to kind of know the internal thinking. You know, we had ideas about what it was, and Brad Stone had done some great reporting in his big book that came out in 2012, 2013. But we wanted to know what was the thinking internally. And there were a few people that have kind of made a career in some ways of talking about what the internal thinking was at Amazon. They were really interesting interviews, in part because I don't think they'd really been asked very tough questions over the years, bouncing these ideas about, okay, well, you know, these ideas of leverage. When Amazon, for instance, created its marketplace and its platform for third parties to sell there, we spoke to some of the guys who had created the marketplace. And essentially, you know, their job was to go out and get third-party brands to sell on Amazon. But they'd never really thought about the idea that that at the end of the day, they'd have all the power and the data. They didn't think of it that way. And then when confronted with that, that was what made the interviews interesting, is that essentially they kind of realized that. But internally, I think this is a company that works so quickly and sees itself as constantly improving. And it's something, Spencer, you said earlier, it's like their strategies, you'd think that there's some grand strategy about things. Often it's just like a day-to-day experimentation with things, seeing what works and seeing what doesn't work. And so in some ways, people hadn't really stepped back to ask themselves tougher questions about what it was that they were building, what it meant to kind of exercise their power in the ways that they were exercising their power. And that was something that was really surprising. most, the vast majority of former people did not speak to us on camera. That's the bar that we have. It only goes so far for us for people to speak on background. Most were insistent on off the record. Interestingly, one of the trends that struck Anya Borg, my producing partner, and me in reaching out to these people is that, we've done big stories on other big companies like Facebook, and almost everyone we spoke to that was a former wanted to strike a deal. And it was very Amazonian in that respect. They always wanted to say, okay, well, what's in it for me to go on camera and talk about this? What's in it for me? And we're not in any position to strike deals. But it was so fascinating in that was absolutely an ingrained mentality, I'd say. I mean, I'm throwing it out there, but maybe of like 60, 70% of the formers that we spoke to, they were really interested in what was in it for them. And to say, okay, we're doing this for public television, it's in the public interest to understand the kind of inner thinking of this company that has an outsized role in our society at this point in our economy. That wasn't enough of an incentive. Even though they didn't necessarily have non-disclosure agreements, what they had to say wasn't necessarily explosive in any way. It was just kind of clarifying or explanatory. So that's something that we ran up against a lot. But there were, what was striking about the formers that we did speak to, again, and what's so interesting about Amazon as a company is that there is a real indoctrination with the thinking there. They really do believe in this Amazon way, that this company that's set up as sort of an experimental laboratory with this idea that there's still a startup. And the Bezos idea, his leadership principle, in a way, of every day is day one and day two is stasis, and everybody needs to think as though we're basically static and obsolete tomorrow unless we keep innovating and moving. Really, in other words, move fast and break things is absolutely the prevailing ethos there. So some of the formers that we spoke to, this woman, Rachel Greer, who'd worked in product safety, described in great granularity how that mentality manifests itself. And I think it also speaks to the issues of subsidies. I think that they, Greg, a lot of what we talked about was the idea that during their expansion, they realized that they couldn't rely on their tax loopholes anymore, and they needed to start, adapting and figuring out how to strike deals with local authorities and get these incentives. And they're just, it speaks to both how extraordinary this company is, but also that internally is rarely, if ever, questioned as a way of going about business. And so anyhow, that's kind of a bit of a primer on where we ended up.
Thanks very much, James. Rather great summary from everybody. Thank you, especially to Laura and Spencer as well. I think this area is so crackling with remarkable things going on, outrageous tax deals like those in California, et cetera, going on. So time for questions. Go ahead.
Yeah, James actually answered a question that I had about NDAs. I guess at Amazon they don't have them. I remember
they do. In some cases they do, but in some cases, if it was a former employee from a long time ago, they don't have them. But they do have NDAs there.
Would it have been a violation of ethics to say 60 to 70% of the people who reached out to, when we were trying to see if they would speak to us on camera, they kept asking for that deal? That seems to be illustrative of something that Amazon seems to drill in, or maybe that's just a general corporate culture thing. Is that something that would be reportable, even though you couldn't get anyone on camera to negotiate that deal live, but that was the experience that you had talking with these former Amazon people?
Look, I don't think there's anything wrong with asking for a deal. I just thought it was an insight into the mentality there, which again, coming back to Spencer's use of the word leverage, it's that they know they have something valuable to say to a journalist, and they want to know what's in it for them. Besides furthering, public understanding of this powerful company. So I just thought it was, there is this mentality that's so interesting in thinking about them, and it's clear when it came to the HQ2 story that they always feel as though they're in a position of power, and that it's all about what the best deal is for them. And this comes down and trickles down to the kind of the mentality of individuals. I don't think that they're asking something, they weren't asking something unethical. They just definitely saw it as transactional, and that's something, you know, in reporting lots of different stories, it was a pervasive theme in this particular story.
Yeah, I guess I asked partly because I was thinking about, like, why would anyone think a journalist could have anything besides public interest and attention to give in such a, but
Yeah.
I just don't know what I would be able to, like, in a transaction thing, like, I don't know what I would give. I don't. I guess my
think-
second question.
I guess if I could chime in, Ufan, and if you're thinking about business reporting, you should get quite used to that question, because it's a common one. And just in any career, whether it's journalism or anything, just think about being a salesperson, and you have to think about what you bring to the table. And so, and also, just to be a good journalist, you have to be aware of those things. There are always alarmists, right? You're always going to encounter people who are screaming from the rooftops, generally about something horrible that happened to them, and they want the world to know, and they want to shame the people that they perceive as harming them. And so those folks are easy to find. And then, but often you get a pretty skewed prism of reality from them. Not always, you know, but oftentimes. And then other folks, you know, how can you get a level-headed, non-alarmist, fairly realistic person to give you, with inside knowledge, to give you an assessment of what happened? And it's a very difficult tightrope to walk. You should get used to getting that question. Generally the biggest thing we have, like if James wanted to do a frontline special on a former Amazonian who started a new company, they'd be beating down his door.
Beating down the door.
But he's not interested in their new company. He's interested in their, you know, and so that's where but often just exposure. And that's where I think, like, we have a very good collaborative relationship with organizations like Good Jobs First. They want their data out there. They're eager to share it. They'll get on the phone with us and share their expertise. They have a mission. They're mission focused. So you can think about that. But then if it's not necessarily a mission focused organization, some people just getting publicity as an exposure as an expert, someone with particular expertise, that's incredibly valuable thing you bring to the table as a journalist. And so don't sell yourself short in terms of what you bring to the table.
Great advice. I guess since Bezos has ended up being such a tabloid figure, everybody thinks it's the National Enquirer and they can get $40,000 for hot pictures on a yacht or something.
Yeah, I guess if I have other questions, particularly, I remember, like, when the coronavirus pandemic hit, there's a lot of talk about unionization in cities like New York, like some of the major centers about unionization and Amazon cracking down on that. And so my initial question about NDAs was initially inspired by reading about that and whether or not, Spencer, it was hard for you to get workers to speak about unionization or work conditions because they feared that Amazon was, maybe they're not on the NDA, but they were going to fire them if they got exposure.
Want to talk about that, Spencer?
Yeah, I mean, getting people to speak is always a challenge. As a reporter, it's often a good sign for you if people are willing to take that leap of faith. If you reach out to a group of people who are actively working somewhere, and a decent representative sample of them are willing to take that leap of faith and speak to you, that alone is a decent sign that there's a problem. Because generally, if things are working out for you in your workplace and you like it and it's good, again, back to your earlier question, what's in it for me? You know, why would they do it? You know, if everything's working out, why would they risk it by talking to a reporter? So that in and of itself, just the willingness of people to take that leap of faith and talk to you is a good gut check that something's wrong. And then in terms of the unionization, you're going to have, there are laws that protect people, but there is a lot of there is a real lack of knowledge about those laws, and those laws are constantly being interpreted. So even experts don't exactly know what's okay, what isn't okay. And even if someone does something that's completely legal, it doesn't mean they won't be punished for it. And it doesn't mean that they won't have to fight for their right. And often they won't, and they'll just walk away, because the way our system is set up is if someone is fired for trying to create a union or somehow organize at a place of business, if they get fired, federal agents don't come sweeping in. That person has to file a complaint. They have to make a compelling evidence. They have to have some sort of story to tell. They have to convince an agency that they were wronged. Then that agency has to take action. Now, meanwhile, this person has no money. They have no income. They have to try to pay their rent and bills and feed their family. And so there is like this, it can be very high risk for people to, even though there's laws that protect it, it can be a very risky endeavor for workers to pursue these things for real reasons, not for, you know, imagined reasons. So, but again, I think for us, especially if people are currently working there, we will offer anonymity, because I think it's pretty fair to say that Amazon has a track record of firing people who speak out. So you know, that's where, as a journalist, you have to think, when do we grant anonymity? And it's a bigger challenge if you're in video like James and that sort of thing. And are they going to silhouette someone and mask their voice or that sort of thing? But if you're willing to grant people anonymity, and you can corroborate certain accounts from a number of people, you know, that's how you get around that.
And the last thing,
I was just going to say, in lieu of a union, in quite a few places, like the Inland Empire, Riverside, and San Bernardino counties, like Will County on the southwest corner of the Chicago metropolitan area, there are worker centers, House Workers Resource Center in San Bernardino, the Warehouse Workers for Justice in Joliet, that are not unions exactly. They're trying to inform workers of their rights to collect for the national. Are you reporting on that, Laura?
Yeah, I've talked to the Workers Resource Center in San Bernardino about these deals, and they you know, they do what they can, but they're also overwhelmed. They can't even keep track. I mean, these deals are buried on city council agendas with very little splash, and they can't keep track of them as much as they are. That's part of their mission. So it's definitely a struggle. Yeah.
Laura, in your reporting, in terms of, you know, dissent in these localities, right, in Ontario or elsewhere, on city councils or political figures that may have taken your reporting and said that this has to stop somehow, what are you seeing?
Not a lot. I mean, I've been to a couple city council meetings where these have been on the agenda or watched, and there's very little feedback. There's very little outrage. There's no outrage, really.
Really? Not really?
People aren't really aware of them. I think when there was a bill in the legislature, that elevated it, and that gave some members of the legislature a chance to say how horribly these things smell and how frustrated they are. But even the cities can't agree. So like the League of Cities took a position against these deals, but that pits the cities that have them against the cities that don't. And they all have lobbyists. And the bill to ban the deals was in the legislature, and some cities testified against it because they had a lot of sway. So it's all depends on how much you listen to your constituents, and there's not a lot of community outrage at all. very
It'll be
low.
interesting once, tax revenue as a result of COVID starts falling and social
Mhm.
services and other things kind of get affected, to see how, whether outrage about this amps up in terms of, tax
Yeah.
giveaways or subsidy deals and things like that. You'd imagine it would.
You would imagine. I'm not sure. But
Yeah.
the interesting thing about Amazon when I was reporting this is that Amazon does have a lot of deals with cities, but I was told by one city official that they won't touch these sales tax sharing deals. They'll take tons of other types of subsidies but part of another factoid about how Amazon can be kind of unfathomable. Like they don't want these deals. They'll take their property tax abatement, they'll take their sales and use tax breaks, they'll take their city, building permit fee breaks. They'll take everything, but they don't want these. Who knows? I mean, I don't. And of course, Amazon, you guys have a lot of experience. They don't talk to anybody. Like, to get someone at the company to talk to you in any type of substance about anything is pretty tricky. So I couldn't dig down into why Amazon holds its nose at this type of subsidy, but then takes all these other ones.
That's interesting. I don't think I've heard that distinction. Kasha, is that anything you've picked up in tracking the latest deals, or is there a dearth of sales tax sharing deals that we've seen?
No, I have not seen any of those deals. But one thing that came to my mind, Laura, when you mentioned that, is that maybe it's because, and I know you said that you went through like a lot of trouble to get this information, but in the end you did get this information, because it seems like some of them are basically treated as payments or like grants, and those tend to be more transparent. That tax-based incentives. Maybe Amazon doesn't want to touch those sales because in the end, they might be, accessible. The amounts might be accessible to the public. For reporting like yours, while property tax abatements tend to be less transparent and harder to get information on them. So that's, that was my first thought, but
That
I don't
makes
know.
sense. That totally makes sense. Yeah.
Greg, may I ask Spencer a question?
Sure.
I'm just curious, so much in the grand narrative right now of COVID and who are the winners and losers of the pandemic in the economy is being made of like Amazon solidifying its place and its power as, vis-a-vis small businesses and others. I mean, is that true? Is that something that's part of your reporting and thinking about who's actually kind of emerging victorious from this, and the concentration of further power there with Amazon?
Yes, I mean, it's absolutely true, but it's not just Amazon, it's any big guy. And then beyond that, it's any store that was allowed to stay open, right? And so a big part for brick and mortar, a lot of it was just like a grocery loophole, right? So like at the height of COVID, if you wanted to go to the toy store down the street, you couldn't. The government said you're not essential, it's closed. You can go to Walmart because they sell lettuce, but you can still have your kid, snot-nosed kid running around the toy aisle, touching everything in sight, and no one's stopping that, So there was this, the nature of it and the grocery loophole and what was deemed essential versus what isn't gave an inherent advantage to any business that sells grocery, including big box stores like Target and Costco and Walmart. And then Amazon fits in with the logistics loophole. So any logistics providers were allowed to operate as well. So if you simply have, a big chunk of the economy shut down, Main Street businesses shut down because most of them are niche oriented, and then other businesses that remain open, the businesses that remain open have a tremendous advantage. Imagine being in a you and I are going to race each other. You're going to start running 5 minutes before I do, and then I get to start, just that's basically what happened. It was like a timeout was called on tremendous number of businesses while everybody else got to keep racing ahead. So yeah, but again, I would say it's not just Amazon, it's just big retailers in general and big retailers that sell grocery.
Yeah, Target as well. We've got about, within people's indulgence, I'll run a few minutes over because we started a tiny bit late, maybe about 7 more minutes. Do you have another question, Ufan?
Only one. Like, well, you said you had to do a lot of data work with Ontario. I guess there's no easy way to do it, but what was the most user-friendly way to do it? Because it was all PDFs, so I assume you had to like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, our data people, or the experts in that, I mean, I kind of know what they did, but took the PDFs and did OCR, optical character recognition, and some R programming language to scour the documents looking for particular words, so we knew which companies' names we were looking for. With Apple, they had these two other entities that they created, so we knew we were looking for not just Apple, but these other two companies, and just scrub the data to build a database of the entries that we found with the machine reading. And then we really had to just manually go through each page to confirm that what the programming picked up was accurate. And it was pretty laborious. But when you can ask for the documents in a machine readable format all you want, and they're always going to give them to you in the crappiest form possible, so that you have to spend as much, 10 times more effort to get the data out of it than, that they could have given you this in an Excel spreadsheet. They have it. They made a PDF out of it, for the love of God. They have it. And so it was just kind of another, it's just par for the course. It was hard, but we did it. And they gave us the bare minimum when they realized that it was public, and then the rest was up to us. So hopefully you just have the right people on your team who can get the data out of the documents.
Okay. Great points. Any other questions around the bend here? Phil Matura, our research director, joined us as well. Well, the only other point I'll make about the increasing secrecy of Amazon, Kasia and Laura mentioned, it's our impression since 4 years ago in the late 2016 when we issued our study on Amazon, beginning to document the incentives to the warehouses and documenting the trajectory, right, that it really had to do with the evolution of their business plan, right? Because when in their early days, the business plan had to do with sales tax avoidance, and that meant very few warehouses located mostly in states that had no sales tax, and then shipping into states without a sales tax, and thereby avoiding nexus, the legal ability of a state to compel sales tax collection. But as their business plan morphed from sales tax avoidance as a market share, price advantage, to rapid delivery, 2-day, 1-day, same day, they couldn't avoid having warehouses everywhere. And that's when the build out began. And that's when they hired Mike Grella and created their tax break department in 2012, and have been getting about on average about 19 or 20 incentive deals per year ever since. So that's the story. I also put in the chat the story map that we created, that Christine, one of our staff, created a few months ago. It's dated now because they keep creating many new warehouses, but as of about a year ago, it's up to date, which is a map of all the warehouses of Amazon in the country, juxtaposed with income by zip code and infrastructure, so that you can see the logic behind what I'm talking about, which is to say, as they build out, the new warehouses are all located, 2 or 3 ramps out on the highway from the affluent zip codes with the high number of prime subscriber households. In warehouse districts or more industrial space where the land is a little bit cheaper, but still very close to the airport, the railhead, the truck depot, and the affluent zip codes. Those are really the crosshairs. If anybody else doesn't have any other questions, I'll thank our panelists very much for their expertise. Thank you so much, everybody. And I'll give it back to Arlene, who is our dashboard comptroller here, in case there's anything else we should do before we clock into the last half hour of our time here on as exhibitor status.
No, I'm just going to stop recording. Thank you all for participating, and we'll hang out and talk to anyone else at IRE.